LaxFactor podcast.
What is up, college lacrosse fans? You are watching episode, I think it's 78, but I'm not 100% sure, of the LaxFactor podcast. Today, we are doing a weekend preview show again. We're going to talk about a bunch of Division I lacrosse games. I'm going to set lines on those lacrosse games so you can bet against your friends. And before I get into all of that, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Really just smash that like button blindly, as I always say. Or if you want to support us beyond that, you can go to LaxFactor.com. You can buy swag, hats, t-shirts, mugs, whatever. Or you can just watch our videos and everything there. We're also doing a new thing where we're doing computerized power rankings. So we have our first power rankings out for week 1 with all of the teams that have already played ranked so far. So you can check that out. I'll put a link in the description as well. And I was correct. This is episode 78. So let's get into this and start with our very first game, the Mount St. Mary's at Towson. The Mount, they lost to Delaware, and Towson lost to Hopkins. The 2019 version of this game, Towson got played tough, and they only beat Mount St. Mary's at Mount St. Mary's 12-7. Now, in their game last week, Luke Frankenny had 5 goals in the loss that the Mount had to Delaware, so that's a lot better than the 4 points that Towson's leading scorer, Kobe Smith, had as a long pole. So at least the Mount has offensive players scoring most of their points as opposed to defensive players. In the end, though, I like Towson's athleticism in this game. I like their defense. I think their defense is going to make it tough for Mount St. Mary's, and I think that, once again, probably Kobe Smith is going to put up some points, and I'm hoping that Towson will find a little bit of consistency on offense playing against a team that's not known for their defense. So in this game, I do like Towson. I'm going to set the line for this at Towson minus 3.5. The next game, Michigan is playing Hofstra. Michigan at Hofstra. Michigan coming off a 16-9 win over Cleveland State, and Hofstra coming off a 21-11 thumping of Wagner. Hofstra lit the world on fire over lowly Wagner, putting up 21 goals. Sykes, McIntosh, and Tierney, they went for 6 points, 5 points, and 4 points respectively. So Hofstra, they can score goals. We knew that. And for the Wolverines, Zawada, 2 and 3, Clay and Buchanavage, they each tallied 4 points. So Michigan, once again, trying to keep pace with the other teams in the Big Ten. Scoring points is something that they'll do well. Zawada playing well is key. Buchanavage, we knew he was going to put up some points. I'm going to say this is going to be a close game. I'm going to set this line, though, at Michigan minus 2.5. I think Michigan is going to be the better team here. I think Michigan's going to beat Hofstra. This is one, though, that it could go either way. I felt like one of these two teams is going to end up beating the other by 2 to 3 goals, which is why I said it here. But I'm thinking it's going to be Michigan that's going to pull it out. I think the Big Ten athleticism, I think that Michigan returns a bunch of key players, a bunch of really good scorers. And I think that overall they're just a little bit deeper than Hofstra. Could be wrong, though. We'll see. Next game, Penn. They have not played yet. At Maryland. Maryland is now 2-0. They just came off that double OT thrilling win over Richmond. Penn, they're coming off a successful 2020, though, seeing them beat the Ivy League, their Ivy League foe, Yale. They beat them once in the regular season. They beat them in the Ivy League finals, and then they finally lost to them in the NCAA quarters. So they beat Yale twice, lost to them that magic third time in the quarterfinals after Penn actually picked up a first-round win over Army in the NCAA tournament. So huge year for Penn last year. And then they return a boatload of weapons. They return Adam Goldner, 53-7, Sam Handley, one of the best midfielders in the country as a freshman, 35 goals, 25 helpers. Sean Lully, 16-15. Mitch Bartolo, 16-7. The list goes on. They return a bunch of offensive talent. They're going to be a tough squad. They're going to be able to run offensively with anyone, and they'll play solid, at-home, intelligent defense. Maryland, on their front, they got Logan Wisnauskas. He's been the real big cat, I guess you would say, for Maryland. 9 goals, 5 assists over their first 2 games. And then DeMayo and Bernhardt. DeMayo's 4-6 and Bernhardt 7-2. And they've both factored heavily in key points, especially of the game last week where Bernhardt scored the last 2 goals for Maryland to tie that game up. I believe Wisnauskas actually assisted at least 1, maybe 2 of them. And then DeMayo scored the game winner, assisted by Wisnauskas. So that that trio of 3 players there, of Wisnauskas, DeMayo, and Bernhardt, they are going to be tough for everybody this year. I think that this game, if it was played mid-season, might go the way of Penn, or at least it would be a lot more fair. I think the fact that Maryland's heading into their third contest and they played two decent teams already going into it 2-0, I think that they're going to be a little bit sharper than Penn. I think Penn may come out hot, but I think once again they're going to have a hard time keeping Maryland down in the long run because I think Maryland's experience, 2 games under their belt is going to help them. I was rambling on that. But the end of the line here, line is Maryland minus 3.5. I think that Maryland actually could pull away from Penn a little bit. I think that the Ivy getting a late start is going to be what ends up hurting them. So I'm going with Maryland at minus 3.5. I'm not sure about that one now as I say it out loud. Maybe I should have gone Maryland minus 2.5, but I'm sticking to it, Maryland minus 3.5. And in all of these, I'll tell you if I think that, you should take the underdog. But so far, I think that the winners are going to win these games. The only one I'm really not sure of is Michigan Hofstra. So if I was really setting the Vegas line, I think you might want to take me on that one because now that I say that one too, I'm thinking, Hofstra can score goals. Maybe they beat Michigan. But either way, Maryland minus 3.5 over Penn. I would take that one myself. This game, really good game here. Number 20 Rutgers against number 14 Army. Rutgers 2-0 with convincing wins over Quinnipiac and St. John's. And Army 2-0, they beat down UMass, and then they beat down New Jersey IT, which we expected them to do. Both of these teams so far have beaten up their opponents. For Rutgers, it's been Charlon Beatty, 7 goals and 2 helpers. Gallagher, 8-1. They have feasted on goals. And then Kieran Mullins, 2-6. He's played QB, distributed the ball a little bit more. Russo has looked solid in cage for Rutgers so far with a 58% save percentage, so he's been good. So Rutgers looking solid coming into week 2 here. Army, Brendan Nichtern has been the man, 7 goals, 7 assists over their first 2 games. Sean O'Brien's closely behind him, 6-2. But Nichtern, he's the key. He has to play well in order for Army to play well, and so far he has. I do not expect that to be any different against Rutgers. I think that Nichtern's going to have a great game. Army's freshman goalie, Wyatt Schupler, he's been spectacular in that 78.9% save percentage so far for the freshman over their first 2 games. He was key in Army's dismantling of UMass with 13 saves versus just 4 goals against, because that UMass score, that spread was surprising. I thought that was going to be a good game. I actually picked UMass to win that one by 1, and I think Army won 17-4. I was totally off on that. I think that this is going to be a good game, but I think that Army's win over UMass is kind of telling. So for this one, I think it's going to be close-ish, but I'm going the line on this one, Army minus 3.5. I think Army's going to pull out a 3 or 4 goal win in this game, and I think that's a decent line. I think it'll be fairly close, but once again, Army already surprised me with that huge win over UMass. Next game. Number 18, Lehigh at number 2, Virginia. Lehigh coming off a so-so win over Utah. They're 1-0. Virginia 1-0 with the win over Loyola last week. So I'd say that both of these teams probably hoped to beat up their opponents last week by a little more than they did. Utah and Virginia, Utah probably should, Lehigh, especially with how Lehigh played in the fall, looked like Lehigh was going to fill it up this year because they were putting goals on all sorts of people in the fall. So I think they were probably hoping to get themselves to 18 goals or so over Utah. Didn't happen. 16-11 win there. And then Virginia beat Loyola by 3. They were up by more than that and let Loyola get back in it. With Lehigh, Tom Schelling, he factored heavily. He's got 7 goals and 2 helpers in that win that they had. And then senior Andrew Pettit went 2-2 for Lehigh. So they have guys that can score. They should be able to put some points up on Virginia. But UVA, they're a pick your poison. You take away Matt Moore, Krause will feast. Take away Aiken, any number of young guns at the midfield will step up. Maybe Cormier is one of them. He had a good game last week, put up a hat trick. So this game last year was close. UVA beat Lehigh by 3. I'm not sure Lehigh is as good as they were last year at this point, and I'm not sure that UVA's defense is as bad as they were. The UVA's defense struggled early last year, and they kind of shored that up by the end of the year to the point they were playing the bully ball that they won the national championship with, and that they showed a little bit against Loyola last weekend. So I think that Virginia is going to win this game. I think they win it by a margin. I'm setting the line at this one. Line is Virginia minus 5.5. I think they're going to win by 5 or 6 goals in that one. Yale, number 3, runners up last year, taking on Villanova. Villanova coming off a not a one-goal loss. They're 0-1 coming off a loss to Penn State. I think they lost by 9. Nova's traditionally played Yale tough. I think in 2017, they lost by 4 or 5. 2018, Villanova beat both Penn and Yale at the beginning of the year. 2019, Nova lost by a goal to Yale. So Nova traditionally plays them well. This is a different Nova team, though. They do return a lot of weapons. Kirst, Kahn, Campbell, Daly, they're all back. They all factored heavily in the loss to Penn State last week. So that's a good sign for Villanova that their known quantities did score and put some points up against Penn State. Vitone in cage, he struggled last week, but that's against Penn State. But as a first-year starter last year, he put up a 52% save percentage, so he has potential of being solid, and he can get hot in cage for Villanova. For Yale, though, they returned one of the best attack lines in the country. Jackson Morrill, 45 goals and 46 helpers. Matt Brandow, 49 and 24. Gaudet, the Undertaker, 49 and 2. These guys are bonkers. I saw them play in the scrimmage against Syracuse. They look great. Yale, the only place that Yale's hurting is midfield. Jack Ty, gone. Joey Sessa, gone. Back, Brian Tevlin, Lucas Kotler, Brendan Rooney, and the kingpin T.D. Erlin on midfield. So they do have pieces back, and they look good in the scrimmage against Syracuse so far as well. So I expect that, yes, they lost some known quantities and points at the midfield, but they have enough talent at the midfield, I think, to make up for that. And then that attack line is just going to probably be a little bit more productive. Defensively, Yale is stacked. Chris Fake, Will Wetzel, Jack Starr, all back. So Yale brings back a complete team, both offensively and defensively. This could be a good one, but Yale, I think, is going to win without being scared in this game. I think that Villanova is going to have a hard time with Erlin in his first game of 2020. I'm going to set the line at Yale minus 5.5. Simply because I think they'll win by 5 or 6 goals. They could win by more than that, but they have a history, and that history includes Villanova doing well. So I don't want to set this too high. So I think Yale at minus 5.5 is pretty fair. Another good game on the docket here. Number 12 Cornell against Albany, playing at Albany. It's supposed to be really cold outside in upstate New York. Both of these teams are coming off disappointing 2019s. Cornell, they came in last year ranked top 5, never panned out from the very first game through the rest of the season. They just never lived up to that top 5 hype, and they ended up not even making the NCAA tournament. Cornell, they're going to have to handle their non-conference business and do well in their own conference to even have a shot at making the NCAA tournament. And with teams like Yale and Penn and the Ivy, it's going to be a bumpy road, or could be a bumpy road for Cornell. Albany, they had a rough year last year as well, as everybody knows. They're looking to bounce back. I don't think it's going to be this week, though. I think Cornell, they're going to play angry. They're going to play hot. I just don't think Albany has enough on defense and in cage for them to be a real threat. And I think Cornell, yeah, they're not a top 10 team, but I think they're still a legitimate top 20 team. And I think that Jeff Teat is going to do what Jeff Teat does in the shitty weather in upstate New York. I don't think that Cornell's going to smoke them by any means, and I think the weather's probably going to be a factor in keeping this a little closer, but I'm still going to set the line for this one at minus 4.5. Cornell minus 4.5. I think probably a 4 to 5 goal margin is fair with the weather being what it is. I think that maybe Cornell might even get up by 7 or 8, and then Albany could chip back in a little bit, but I think a 4 or 5 goal spread is probably fair in that one. Now, this game here, this is my upset alert. It's hard to call this an upset, but I have to for the purpose of this. Duke and Denver. Duke at Denver. Number 13 Duke, 1-1. They've got the win over High Point and the loss to Air Force. Number 9 Denver has a win over Air Force, over the very Air Force team that beat Duke. So how can you not like Denver in this one? Duke's having a hard time figuring out who they are offensively, although they looked good last week against High Point. Denver just beat the team up that beat Duke in Durham. So I honestly think Duke's going to pull out a win here. I have a feeling Duke is going to pull out a win here, but I think Vegas would definitely have to set the line in favor of Denver on this one. I'm going to set the line at Denver at minus 1.5, but I personally think that Duke could beat them by 2 or 3. But I just feel like Denver with the win over Air Force, Denver playing at home, Duke losing to Air Force, Duke not having a true offensive pimp, and Denver has a couple here at this point. I feel like Denver has the better offensive players on the field, even though Duke probably has the best defender on the field. So I think that Denver's shooters are going to be too much, so I'm going to set it at Denver minus 1.5, but I think that Duke very easily could pull this out by 1 to 3 goals as well. Another game. We're just rolling through games here this week. Number 11, Johns Hopkins, 1-0. They've got the win over Towson. Number 16, Loyola, 0-1 with the loss to UVA. These guys are bitter rivals. Last year, Loyola embarrassed Hopkins in this game with Pat Spencer asking America, are we not entertained? We were entertained, by the way, in that game as he, feasted on Hopkins and bathed in their blood in the middle of the field, and I was excited to see that. Two totally different teams this time around, though. Hopkins, unproven defense. Loyola, unproven offense. Loyola's defense is nice. I just don't think they have enough weapons to keep pace overall with Hopkins, especially if Epstein plays. Hopkins, I think, is going to outlast Loyola in a close game, probably similar to how the UVA game went. I'm going to set this line, though, at Hopkins at -2.5. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Hopkins could win by as much as 3 or 4. They could end up beating them by 7 for all we know, but I think there is a chance that Loyola could upset Hopkins still or could still cover that spread. So Hopkins at -2.5. The only other game I'm going to do is going to be Binghamton at Syracuse. And I'm only setting this one just because I think, it's fun sometimes to set the bloodbath. So this is my bloodbath of the week alert. This is going to almost guaranteed be a bloodbath. I know I have a $5 bet with a buddy of mine with the line being, I took Syracuse at -9.5. So I'm going to set the line here for all y'all at Syracuse -8.5. And that should be good. I think that there's a chance that Syracuse underplays and, only beats them, let's say, by a score of 17-10 or something like that. But I think the problem is going to be BU is going to have a hard time scoring and Syracuse is going to have a hard time not scoring. So honestly, -8.5 might even not even be right, but I feel like that's probably that's fair. And, that's about it. Once again, I'll start getting into the D3 games once they start playing and we start seeing who's doing what and who's going to be interesting to talk about. But now it's just hard to talk about them. That is it. This was a long preview show, I feel like. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And as always, go to LaxFactor.com if you want to support us, and you can buy hats, mugs, t-shirts, whatever. As always, thank you for listening, watching, or whatever you are doing. And be sure to come back Monday and Tuesday. As Monday and Tuesday, we will do our weekend recaps. We'll do half of the games. We'll recap them on Monday, and then the other half of the games we'll recap on Tuesday as we break it up into 2 different videos. So that is it. Thank you for watching. Enjoy.